In Dodge City, a man could enter a saloon with a month's wages and leave without his money, his horse, his reputation, or his life. But losing at cards was not the greatest danger. The real danger was believing the saloon was only a place to drink. Behind the swinging doors, cattle contracts changed hands. Elections were discussed before voters heard the names. Lawmen received warnings. Gamblers bought information. Railroad men met merchants. Prostitutes heard secrets from customers who would never speak freely in daylight. A bartender could learn more in one night than a sheriff learned in a week, and the owner behind the bar might hold more power than the mayor. That was the Frontier Saloon. Part tavern, part bank, part gambling hall, part employment office, part courtroom without a judge. It was where strangers were measured. Alliances were built, grudges ripened, and the future of a town could be decided over whiskey that tasted like smoke and bad decisions. To understand how much power lived inside those rooms, we are going to Dodge City, Kansas, during the cattle town years of the 1870s and early 1880s. The Santa Fe Railroad had reached the settlement. Buffalo hunters, soldiers, freighters, merchants, gamblers, cowboys, lawmen, and drifters came through with money to spend and reasons to hide. The town grew near Fort Dodge and the railroad tracks, with Front Street becoming its loud, muddy commercial heart. During cattle season, Texas herds arrived by the thousands. Cowboys came in after weeks or months on the trail carrying dust in their clothes and pay in their pockets. The saloon waited for both. Walk toward one after dark, and you would hear it before you saw it. Piano notes through thin walls, boots on floorboards, glass striking wood, a dealer calling a game, laughter too loud to be peaceful, maybe a woman singing over voices that did not want to listen. Then the doors opened. Light hit the street. For 1 second, every face inside could turn toward you. That moment mattered. The room was reading you. Were you a trail hand ready to spend? A buffalo hunter with cash? A railroad worker looking for trouble? A stranger carrying news? A deputy checking the tables? A gambler pretending not to be one? The saloon made quick judgments because quick judgments made money and prevented bloodshed. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco, sweat, lamp oil, whiskey, leather, and dust. The floor might be bare boards, sometimes covered with sawdust to absorb spit, mud, spilled liquor, and whatever else the night left behind. A long bar dominated the room. Bottles stood against a mirror if the establishment could afford one. A brass rail, polished wood, paintings, curtains, or chandeliers might signal that this was no rough drinking shed. Some saloons were crude rooms where the liquor was questionable and the furniture looked temporary. Others were theaters of respectability. That difference was deliberate. A successful owner wanted customers to believe they had entered a place with standards, even if the faro game was draining them. The whiskey was overpriced, and a pistol waited under the counter. The famous Long Branch Saloon became one of Dodge City's best-known establishments. It was associated with men who were not merely bartenders or hosts, but cattlemen, gamblers, bankers, and political players. That combination tells us what the saloon really was. It was not outside respectable business. It was connected to it. And once you understand that connection, the Old West begins to look very different. The first drink was often the least important transaction in the room. A cowboy might pay for whiskey, but the saloon profited from everything that happened after the glass touched his hand. He stayed. He played cards. He bought another round. He heard about a job. He met a cattle buyer. He followed a dance hall woman upstairs or into another establishment. He borrowed money. He made a bet. He said too much. The saloons sold time as much as liquor, and the longer a man remained inside, the more ways the room found to separate him from his pay. Whiskey in the West ranged from respectable commercial brands to rough liquor that earned frightening nicknames. Stories about tobacco, pepper, burnt sugar, or other substances being used to alter cheap spirits became part of frontier folklore. Not every bottle was poison, and not every bartender was cheating customers, but quality varied, especially in temporary camps where cellars might be gone before complaints caught up with them. Beer became important where transportation and refrigeration made it possible. Railroads brought bottled goods, barrels, cigars, oysters, newspapers, furniture, and luxuries that made a frontier saloon feel connected to cities far away. A drink at the bar could therefore represent more than thirst. It was proof that the railroad had reached town and commerce had followed. But the real heartbeat was gambling. Poker is the game modern audiences remember, but Faro was one of the frontier saloon's great attractions. The rules could look simple enough to invite a beginner, and the pace kept money moving. Monte, dice, keno, billiards, and other games also appeared. Some saloon owners sponsored games directly. Independent professionals rented or operated tables. Dealers watched hands, faces, and tempers. The gambler did not need to win every hand. He needed the customer to believe the next one might be different. A trail cowboy was vulnerable. He had been under discipline for weeks, sleeping rough, eating repetitive meals, and watching cattle instead of cards. Now he was in town with cash. The lights were bright. Drinks came quickly. Men praised his luck. A woman stood nearby. The dealer seemed friendly. Then the losses began. One bad hand could be dismissed. Two could be challenged. By the fourth, pride entered the game. That was when the saloon became dangerous. A man could accept losing money. He had more trouble accepting that others had watched him lose it. The table turned financial loss into public humiliation. Whiskey did the rest. A chair scraped. A voice hardened. One player accused another of cheating. Everyone nearby noticed. The bartender stopped polishing the glass. The dealer's hands became still. The man by the wall shifted his coat away from his holster. Nothing had happened yet. But the room had already changed. This is how violence often worked in a frontier saloon. It did not explode from nowhere. It announced itself through silence, posture, distance, and small choices. A man moved too close. Another refused to look away. Someone used an insult that could not be withdrawn in front of witnesses. The saloon was full of witnesses. That made backing down harder. Movies often showed two men reaching at the same perfect instant. Real confrontations could be confused and ugly. Shots were fired at close range. Furniture blocked movement. Smoke filled the room. Bystanders ran, froze, or drew their own weapons without knowing who had fired first. A bullet meant for one man could find another. And afterward, the same saloon that created the witnesses helped shape the story. Who started it? Who drew first? Was the dead man armed? Had the dealer cheated? The answers depended on friendship, fear, money, and who was still alive. That is another reason saloons held power. They did not only witness frontier history, they controlled the first version of it. If you are enjoying this journey into the real machinery of the Old West, subscribe and stay with us. We are not stopping at the gunfight because the next room inside the saloon held something more valuable than whiskey or cards. It held information. Information moved through a saloon faster than law. A train arrived, and within an hour the room knew who had stepped off. A cattle herd was delayed, and merchants adjusted their expectations before any official announcement. A deputy planned an arrest, and the suspect might hear about it from a bartender, gambler, stable hand, or a woman who had listened quietly while someone boasted. People talked in saloons because the room encouraged confession. Whiskey loosened caution. Noise created privacy. Strangers felt temporary. Men said things at midnight they would deny before breakfast. The bartender occupied the best position in town. He faced everyone. He heard arguments, introductions, lies, and accidental truths. He knew who drank alone, who paid for others, who was suddenly flush with cash, and who had begun asking about the southbound stage. A skilled bartender did not need to ask many questions. He let customers answer questions nobody had spoken. That knowledge could protect the establishment. If trouble was coming, the owner wanted warning. If a customer had money, the games wanted him. If a known thief entered, watches tightened. If a lawman appeared, certain conversations ended, and certain men discovered the back door. But information also became currency. A rancher might learn who was buying cattle. A gambler might hear that a wealthy drover had arrived. A sheriff might discover where a fugitive slept. A political candidate might learn which business owners opposed him. A railroad representative might hear who owned land near a proposed expansion. No bulletin board could compete with that. The saloon was a living newspaper, except its stories could be edited by fear before they reached the street. Women working in and around saloons, dance halls, and brothels also occupied complicated positions inside this information network. Frontier towns often had far more men than women, especially during boom periods. Some women earned money, dancing, serving drinks, entertaining customers, or selling sex. Their lives were shaped by limited choices, economic pressure, social judgment, violence, and the constant need to read men before men became dangerous. They were often treated as decoration in later stories. In reality, they saw everything. A customer trying to impress a woman might reveal where money was hidden, why he had come to town, who he feared, or what he planned to do at dawn. She might pass the information to a friend, an employer, a lawman, or no one at all. Silence could be protection. Knowledge could also be protection. Some saloon owners relied on women to keep men drinking. Dance halls sold tickets or drinks connected to dances. The line between saloon, dance hall, theater, and brothel could be clear in one town and blurred in another. Reformers saw vice. Owners saw revenue. Customers saw escape. The women themselves saw rent, food, risk, and another night to survive. The city saw taxable income. That point matters. Frontier governments often condemned vice in public while depending on money associated with liquor, gambling, fines, licenses, or prostitution. Dodge City's economy during its cattle years was deeply tied to the businesses respectable citizens claimed to dislike. The town needed order, but it also needed cowboys to spend. Too much law could drive money away. Too little law could fill Boot Hill. So officials tried to control behavior without killing the trade. Weapons restrictions were part of that balance. Visitors could be required or expected to surrender firearms in certain areas. Though enforcement and obedience were never as perfect as later legends suggest, the purpose was practical. A town full of armed, drinking, gambling men needed some barrier between insult and gunfire. But a posted rule did not remove every weapon. Small pistols could be concealed. Regulars knew which officers enforced what. Important men sometimes expected exceptions. And the saloon owner could know who was armed before the marshal did. This created a strange hierarchy. The elected official had legal authority. The bartender had immediate knowledge. The professional gambler had eyes on the room. The owner controlled employees and access. The lawman entering through the doors might be the last important person to learn what was happening. That did not make the saloon stronger than the law in every case. It made the saloon part of the law's operating environment. Lawmen drank there. They met informants there. They watched suspects there. Some had friendships or business ties with owners. Others were gamblers themselves at different points in their lives. In cowtowns, the border between lawman, gunfighter, gambler, and entrepreneur could be disturbingly thin. The badge did not always enter from outside. Sometimes it was already sitting at the table. And soon, in Dodge City, a fight over one saloon owner would expose just how deeply those tables were connected to political power. By 1883, the struggle over Dodge City saloons had moved beyond morality. It had become a fight over who controlled the town. Luke Short was a professional gambler, gunfighter, and part owner of the Long Branch Saloon. He was well-dressed, connected, and dangerous in the way quiet men can be dangerous. His business partner William Harris was not merely a saloon figure. Harris had ties to cattle and banking. The Long Branch therefore stood at the intersection of entertainment, money, livestock, and influence. Then a new political faction took power. Mayor Lawrence Deeger and allies pushed policies against vice, including restrictions involving women working in saloons. Reform sounds simple when written later. In practice, enforcement could be selective. Short and his supporters believed rival establishments were receiving better treatment, and that the law was being used to weaken one business group while strengthening another. This was not just a disagreement about respectable behavior. It was economic warfare wearing a moral coat. Short was arrested and forced out of town. That might have ended the matter if he had been only a bartender. He was not. He carried connections with him. News traveled through the network of gamblers, cattlemen, lawmen, and gunfighters who knew one another across the West. Men associated with some of the most famous names in frontier history became involved or appeared in Dodge during the dispute. Wyatt Earp, Bat Masterson, and others were connected to the effort supporting Short. The event became known as the Dodge City War. The name promises shooting. The reality reveals something more important. Power gathered before bullets did. Telegram messages moved. Newspapers reported. Political allies negotiated. The governor received appeals. Armed reputations arrived in town and made their presence known. Each side understood that violence was possible, but violence was not the only weapon. The threat of violence had value by itself. Imagine Front Street as the tension rose. Business continued, but every arrival mattered. A train stopped. Men stepped down. Someone recognized a face. The information reached a saloon before luggage reached a hotel. Masterson is here. Another name followed, then another. Customers who had been laughing began speaking lower. Shopkeepers watched the street. Officials measured how far they wanted the confrontation to go. A famous gunman did not need to draw his weapon to change a negotiation. His reputation entered the room first. This is the microcosm of saloon power. Short's conflict mattered because removing him meant changing the balance among businesses, officials, and vice interests. The Long Branch was not merely losing an owner. One faction was trying to decide which men could profit from Dodge City and which men had to leave. The dispute was ultimately resolved without the grand street battle the name suggests. Short returned. The saloon reopened. A posed photograph later associated with the celebrated group helped turn the affair into legend. But the important lesson is not that famous gunmen came to town. It is why they came. They came because a saloon dispute was serious enough to activate a network across the West. That network included friendship, business, reputation, politics, and potential violence. The Long Branch was the visible center, but the real structure reached far beyond its walls. This is how frontier power often worked. It was personal before it was institutional. Men trusted people they had ridden with, gambled with, fought beside, or helped in an earlier trouble. A telegram to the right man could matter more than a formal petition. A reputation could do work that a court order could not, and the saloon produced those relationships every night. At its tables, men formed debts that were not written down. One man covered another's loss, someone hid a weapon, someone provided an alibi, someone carried news, someone remembered a favor. Years later, the favor might return by train. That is why saloons became centers of power. They gave relationships a place to form, and frontier government was often too young, too weak, or too compromised to compete with relationships already tested by money and danger. Still, the saloon's power had limits. Fire could erase it. Railroads could move trade. Cattle routes could shift. Reformers could organize. And a town that had once begged cowboys to spend might decide it no longer wanted to look like the place they remembered. Before we follow that decline, tell us in the comments, what American Western movie do you remember most clearly? Maybe it was Tombstone, Unforgiven, The Searchers, True Grit, Once Upon a Time in the West, or another film entirely. We want to know which Old West stories you have already watched and which ones stayed with you, because Hollywood remembered the saloon. It just changed almost everything inside it. The movie Saloon is built for a gunfight. The real saloon was built for revenue. That single difference explains most of what Hollywood changed. On screen, the room often waits for the hero. The piano stops when he enters. The villain turns. Everyone knows which men matter. Within minutes, cards scatter, bottles break, and somebody falls through a railing. In reality, most saloons needed customers alive enough to keep spending. Owners did not want every insult to become a killing. Blood was bad for regular business, even when a notorious event later created publicity. Bartenders intervened. Friends separated angry men. Armed employees or bouncers might remove troublemakers. Lawmen watched known threats. A good owner managed danger rather than celebrating it. But management was not mercy. A customer who could not pay might be thrown out. A man accused of cheating could be beaten. A woman without protection could face abuse. A black customer, Mexican worker, native person, Chinese laborer, or immigrant might encounter exclusion or violence depending on the town and establishment. The frontier saloon was not an equal republic of rough men. Race, class, reputation, and money shaped who was welcomed, tolerated, exploited, or attacked. Some establishments served particular ethnic communities or occupational groups. Mining camps, railroad towns, cattle towns, and military posts developed different saloon cultures. An African American saloon could provide community and opportunity denied elsewhere. A German beer hall did not operate exactly like a Texas cowtown whiskey room. A Mexican cantina carried different food, music, language, and customs. There was no single Western saloon. There were hundreds of versions responding to local labor, migration, law, and prejudice. Even the physical rooms differed. Some had elaborate bars shipped by rail, mirrors, paintings, gaming tables, and private rooms. Others had plank counters laid across barrels. Some offered meals or free lunches designed to keep men drinking. Some sold cigars, newspapers, theater tickets, or access to entertainment. Some provided sleeping space in desperate boomtowns. The saloon adapted because the frontier lacked other institutions. Where was a stranger supposed to hear news? Where could a worker find a job? Where could a merchant meet a buyer after dark? Where could political supporters gather? Where could lonely men buy company? Where could a criminal identify a target? Often the answer was the same room. That concentration made the saloon useful and dangerous. It brought together people who otherwise had no reason to meet. A cattle buyer sat near a card, sharp. A deputy drank beside a railroad agent. A trail boss hired hands within hearing of thieves. A politician shook hands while a bartender counted which faction bought the next round. Alcohol did not create every conflict. It removed the guard from conflicts already present. A Texan resented a Kansan. A veteran remembered the war. A gambler recognized a man who owed him. A ranch hand believed the dealer had marked cards. A lawman entered to arrest someone whose friends surrounded the table. The saloon compressed the frontier into one room and added whiskey. That was the formula. Yet there were ordinary nights too. Most glasses did not end in gunfire. Men played music. They exchanged jokes. They read newspapers or listened while someone read aloud. They discussed cattle prices, weather, elections, boxing matches, horse races, distant wars, and women they claimed to know better than they did. Some men came because their work was lonely. A cowboy spent weeks with cattle. A miner worked underground. A railroad laborer lived in a camp of strangers. A buffalo hunter crossed empty country. The saloon offered light, voices, warmth, and the illusion of belonging. A man could buy entry into a temporary community for the price of a drink. That emotional role made reform difficult. Temperance advocates could point honestly to violence, addiction, poverty, abuse, and corruption connected to alcohol. Families suffered when wages disappeared at the bar. Women organized against liquor because they saw what came home afterward. Churches and reform groups demanded enforcement. But closing a saloon did not automatically replace what the room provided. It removed a drinking place. It also removed a hiring hall, news exchange, social club, political room, and refuge from isolation. That is why prohibition battles became battles over community control. Reformers wanted a different social order. Saloon owners defended profit, but also claimed to defend personal freedom and local custom. Politicians discovered that either side could cost them an election. In Dodge City, saloons continued operating through legal pressure because business interests and city finances were entangled with them. Owners could treat penalties as another cost of operation. The law said one thing, the economy said another. And on the frontier, the economy usually spoke louder. If this deeper side of the story is changing how you see the Old West, leave a like. It helps our History and Film Project continue producing immersive stories made to entertain you without flattening the past into another recycled legend. Now watch what happens when the cattle stop coming. The most powerful room in town can become a liability almost overnight. Dodge City's cattle town era did not last forever. No frontier boom ever does. Quarantine boundaries shifted. Rail connections and cattle markets changed. Agriculture expanded. The massive drives that had filled streets with trail crews declined. By the middle of the 1880s, the economic machine that fed the saloons was weakening. Then fire helped erase the physical world. Fires in 1885 destroyed major sections of Dodge City's old commercial district. In a town built heavily from wood, flame could travel faster than authority. Buildings that had survived gunmen, political disputes, drunken nights, and reform campaigns could vanish in hours. Fire did what morality could not. It cleared the street. When Dodge rebuilt, brick replaced much of the earlier wooden landscape. The town wanted permanence, respectability, families, commerce, agriculture, civic pride. The old cattle town image became something residents tried to escape before later generations learned how much money could be made selling it back. That transformation exposed the saloon's dependence on the world around it. The saloon had seemed powerful because money, cattle, railroads, male labor, and weak institutions flowed through the same place. When those streams shifted, the room lost some of its authority. The owner could influence a mayor. He could not command history. Still, saloon culture did not simply disappear. It changed form. Some establishments became more regulated. Others closed under local or state prohibition. Private clubs, hotel bars, restaurants, theaters, and new civic institutions absorbed pieces of what the old saloon had provided. The functions scattered. Banks handled money. Employment offices handled jobs. Newspapers formalized information. Political parties built organizations. Police departments expanded. Clubs offered social life. The frontier saloon had concentrated these functions because towns were young. As towns matured, institutions claimed them one by one. That may be the clearest way to understand its power. The saloon ruled the gap before institutions arrived. It existed where government was weak, population was transient, loneliness was common, and cash moved faster than law. It gave that unstable world a room with a bar, a dealer, a bartender, a stove, and doors that kept swinging. Inside, a man could hear tomorrow coming, the railroad schedule, the cattle price, the election rumor, the arrest planned for dawn, the stranger asking about him. The saloon gave information a place to gather before the town knew what to call it. That is why famous confrontations inside saloons matter less than the thousands of quiet exchanges that left no newspaper record. A handshake that created a business, a warning that saved a life, a lie that destroyed a reputation, a bartender who refused another drink, a woman who heard a murder discussed and decided whether to speak, a gambler who sent a telegram to an old friend. Those moments built the frontier as surely as track, fence, and gun. Now return to Front Street at night. The cattle season is at its height. Light pours through the saloon windows. Texas voices rise over piano music. A faro dealer turns cards beneath hanging lamps. A cattle buyer talks quietly near the bar. A deputy watches a man reflected in the mirror rather than turning to face him. A woman laughs at a joke she has heard 6 times. The bartender pours whiskey while listening to 3 conversations. At one table, a cowboy is losing his wages. At another, 2 businessmen are deciding which candidate to support. Near the rear door, a messenger waits to deliver news that will make someone leave town before sunrise. No one in the room can see the whole system. But the bartender comes close. Then the doors open. A stranger steps inside. The piano does not stop. That part belongs to the movies. Most people barely look up. The bartender notices. The deputy notices. The gambler notices. The woman near the stairs notices. The men who survive frontier rooms are often the ones who notice without showing it. The stranger orders a drink. He asks one question. Is Luke Short in town? Now the room changes. Not dramatically. A dealer pauses half a second too long. The deputy sets down his cup. The bartender reaches for a bottle from a lower shelf, giving himself a better view of the stranger's hands. Power has moved through the room without anyone drawing a gun. That was the real saloon. It did not need constant violence to control people. It controlled access, information, credit, entertainment, employment, reputation, and introductions. It gave powerful men privacy and desperate men temptation. It created witnesses and then taught them when to forget. It made politicians condemn vice in daylight and negotiate with its owners after dark. The saloon was not merely where the West relaxed. It was where the West revealed itself. Greed sat beside loneliness. Violence sat beside business. Law sat beside gambling. Respectability entered through the front, while corruption waited in the back room. And when Hollywood rebuilt the saloon on studio lots, it kept the swinging doors, mirror, piano, cards, whiskey, and guns. Those images were true enough to feel familiar. What disappeared was the machinery. The rates discussed, the votes counted, the jobs offered, the warnings sold, the taxes collected, the alliances formed, the women listening, the bartender remembering. That machinery is why the frontier saloon mattered. It was a business built from thirst, but its real product was connection. In a country of distance, it brought people together. In a country of weak institutions, it organized influence. In a country obsessed with independence, it showed how deeply every man depended on someone else. So the next time a Western hero pushes through swinging doors, do not only watch the gunman at the table, watch the owner behind the bar, watch the dealer, watch the lawman pretending not to listen, watch the messenger near the door, watch the people who know why the stranger has come. Because the man holding the revolver may control the next few seconds, but the people controlling the saloon may control the town.